when I ask, are there any questions, people now are caught by surprise. But during the week, the last week, you may have had some questions, and maybe in the forthcoming week, you may have some questions. And what's useful, yes, and what's useful and helpful for us is that other people in scriptures have asked questions. So I have three books in front of me, but let's deal with two of them. And these are full of questions and also full of answers. So naturally, the one would be the Gospel of Ramakrishna. You find that full of questions, full of answers. And because yesterday was officially Ramakrishna Jayanti, Ramakrishna's Tithi Puja, as we call it, which shifts, of course, according to from year to year. And the other one is the Bhagavad Gita. And they have to be, in order to be truthful, they will have to be complementary. If they're contradictory, we can't deal with them. That's the same with all scriptures. And recently, of course I heard of it before, but it was highlighted, the Didachi, or the Didaki, a text that was discovered in the 11th century of this era, but is referred to by early Christian church fathers. And there, if we can speculate, there's evidence, let us put it this way, that this comes from the 1st century, about the same time as Gospels and so on were written, and may predate them. But if we study it carefully, and those early fathers in Christianity would have noted the authenticity of this text. And so we may have, very close to Jesus' original teachings, understanding that over the centuries there may be some interpolations here and there to conform with theology. So what will be our measure of what is true? In Vedanta, our measure of truth is in Vedas. And we're not that concerned with the ritualistic portion of these Vedas, although they're very interesting and assist people if we interpret them correctly in this life and the next life and so on. But largely, people relegate this to the ritualistic side. But the Vedanta properly, that is the end of the Vedas, the finality, the conclusion, the essence, is to be found in the Upanishads. And Bhagavad Gita covers itself because after every chapter, it declares that it is in fact an Upanishad. And if we are to take the interpretation of people like Shankaracharya and so on, we will understand that upani, that is sitting near, presumably sitting near a teacher. Because all these scriptures, unless you have some kind of enlightened teacher or some kind of person with some kind of insight, not necessarily enlightened fully, then you have no guidance, because you then have interpretation. And one person's interpretation is as good or as flaky as another person's interpretation. So we can only go back to the Upanishads, and even then, 3 interpretations are there. And these represent 3 approaches. They are not just philosophical, intellectual approaches. They're not academic approaches necessarily, although reasoning, rationale, arguments, and discussions, dialectics is involved in supporting your interpretation. But these are actually 3 stanzas, 3 positions, which are natural to us in our spiritual life. So we start off, of course, by thinking that if there is some supreme entity, then it is beyond us. That's a very fundamental way of understanding it. It's based on an interpretation of who we are. And the interpretation goes, well, we are a psychophysical being made from atoms, maybe atomic structures are there, and there are certain behaviors, and we are, when we identify with these behaviors, then, but that is really just a behavioral self that we can observe and doesn't answer the question, who knows it, who's the observer? And Vedanta philosophy goes deeply into this investigation. Who are we? What are we? What is the nature of the self? In fact, one Upanishad, the Prashna Upanishad, will be full of questions. And the whole Upanishad is named after the questioning aspect of students who want to know fundamental questions that we all have. Now, how much we pay attention to these questions, that's different from different people. But the face value of life and accepting the interpretation of what is here in front of us, which we call sense objects, does not answer questions. But if we examine the objects very carefully, we will find that they are indicators. So when we describe yoga, the process of spiritual practice, as tuning the attention in to the glory of the divine self, or what religion calls God, all the glories around us assist in this. And most of these glories escape us. They miss the ears, the eyes, and so on. If our strategy is just to register a survival mode, living from day to day, what does it mean? Well, it's a kind of description of a boring life, which says we get up in the morning. I'm sure everybody does it, either willingly or unwillingly. We go to bed at night. Something happens in between. It could be routine. It may change or vary over a weekend or something, or a holiday. But basically, that's it, and we trudge on. And at some point or other, we get pinched. Nature has a way of pushing us. Nature has a way of stimulating our dissatisfaction and giving us the opportunity to look for something deeper and higher, something that will bring about a more expansive vision of the reality. And the reality is also totality. So I came across this, I revisited this chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because there is one devotee in the UK who said, this Bhagavad Gita, you asked me to read the second chapter, and I read, I can't make head or tail of it. Why? Because even in the English, the language seems, a little peculiar. It's not day to day the way we speak. And I mentioned, well, I have an interpretation, my own kind of, my own translation. Oh, would you give that to me? I said, I'll update it. And what I'll do is I will translate this Bhagavad Gita chapter by chapter, send it to you. And if you publish it, well and good. The person said, you send it, I'll make sure I publish it. Well, when you have something like that the whole world is going to see, you must be sure, firstly, it's a good translation. Secondly, that there are no errors. So I'm sending him a draft of every chapter. Every time I complete it, I send him a chapter. I happen to have completed 7 chapters already, and I'm now on the 8th, and the 8th chapter begins with questions. So why don't we investigate those questions? And it begins with Arjun, of course, asking the questions. When Arjun speaks, when Krishna speaks, the term Ovacha is mentioned. I should point out that the Gita that I'm producing is devoid of all Sanskrit. In other words, to be made as simple as possible for the English reader. Take away the Sanskrit, take away any alternative terms for Arjun and Krishna, which are inserted by Vyasa to make a point. When you say, oh Madhusudana, slayer of Madhu, then you have to go back to the Bhagavatam and see what was the mythological history of that, and what is the philosophical meaning of it. Every word is pregnant with meaning. Never mind, just to make it simple, Arjun is Arjun, and Krishna is Krishna. So it begins, Arjuna Uvacha. Arjun speaks. What is he asking? Kim tad brahma, kim adhyatman, kim karma purushottama. Who is that Brahman? That is, what is that supreme principle? The fundamental question being asked. Is there a God? Is there no God? If there is a God, what is the nature of the God? And you keep mentioning this thing called Brahman. The Upanishads mention it all the time. In fact, the whole subject of the Upanishads is to do with Brahman, Atman, Maya, all those subjects. So I'm asking you firsthand, bypassing all of these, I've heard of this Brahman. What is it? Because this term Brahman has this Brah root. And this Brah root is simply trying to describe the indescribable, giving us an image of infinite possibilities, infinite expansion. But the emphasis on infinity. Can you imagine infinity? If you want to imagine infinity, if you want to imagine imperishability, then you have to close your eyes and take space away completely, and take time away completely. I often give people that exercise. Okay, we're all going to be prepared to take a cosmic photograph. That means you take time away. So you make your last moments, comb your hair, whatever is necessary. And then after I say 1, 2, 3, you are not permitted to move. Nothing is permitted to move. Well, that's not how we describe or experience the world around us. All right? What if we take space away? You close your eyes, you take space away. That means all objects will disappear. We can't even imagine this. So this is a question. What is this supreme principle, this Brahman? 5, 6 questions are being asked. Then what is this thing called Adhyatma? In other words, Adhi means the first or primary or the thing above everything else, all right? And Atma is self. What is that supreme self? In other words, when we strip away all the instrumentality, all the objects which are connected with time and space for us as individuals, what is left? Can you please tell me? What is karma? Today it's very fashionable to say, oh, it's your karma. Or will I get bad karma as a result of this? See? But in Vedanta, we don't have such a thing. Karma belongs to your behavioral self. It doesn't belong to your fundamental self. Your fundamental self has no activity, has no consequences, is not attached to anything. It doesn't move. It's indescribable. It's like asking what happens to the sun if we decide to have a nuclear war and blow the whole earth up. Well, the sun is not really its business. The sun shines, whatever we do with it. So that's a kind of transcendent aspect. Now we have transcendence, we have immanence, we have the concept of something pervading, just as the sun rays pervade the atmosphere and give us life and sunshine. So the story goes, and I've told you the story before, all stories have to begin, I suppose, with once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a cooperative, a kind of company called Cosmic Glass Company Limited. And so they had a board meeting and they decided, we're all made from clear glass. And you see, the sun shines through us. Has anybody bothered to stop and think whether there was a customs or immigration border that demands a visa or a tariff for coming through? Should we not take advantage of our independence, Glass Panes Incorporated, and at least demand that the sun doesn't in an unauthorized way pass through us? So they pass a resolution like that. Boards are famous for passing resolutions. Enacting resolutions become a little bit more difficult. And so they made this resolution at the night time and waited for the sun. As the sun came up and became more of the sunshine went through, and they tried to stop it, rattled themselves together, and broke into fragments. Fragments all gone. Glass panes all gone. Glass pane incorporated all gone. But the sun shone anyway. So the sun has no business. The sun shines, and when it shines through the equivalent of our glass, the transparent aspect of it, the objective world, we call this immanence. And when there are no panes of glass, we call it transcendence. Nothing transcended anything. Nothing entered into anything. It was just always there. So this question, what is karma? Now, of course, there's a law, and that is the law of giving and receiving, the law of sowing and reaping. Yes. But you see, if we want to be really philosophical and ask, this karma, does it involve reincarnation? And my standard answer, which appalls many people, is I don't believe in reincarnation because I don't believe in this incarnation. How will I believe in a reincarnation? This is the non-dualistic answer. And I said 3 positions are there. The normal beginning position is to say that this Supreme Being we acknowledge is somewhere, outside somewhere, a remote thing in outer space. And if we're in trouble, we'll call upon it. Otherwise, we'll leave it to do its own business. And we'll carry on independently in our life and struggle. Now, of course, there are consequences. So, one of the consequences of human life and existence will be to ignore the natural laws pertaining to the human body. And what are the natural laws? The same natural laws operating with wild animals, let's say in Africa. The animals run, they jump, they eat what they need to eat. They don't eat and digest any processed foods. They don't go to the supermarket. They carry on. They evacuate when they have to evacuate. And they run when they have to run. And they have no stress. Now you may say, well, they do have stress. They're constantly looking out for an enemy. Yes, that's okay. That's built in. But when the danger is near, adrenaline rushes, deals with the problem, and it's finished. When the danger is within us, or a circumstance comes to us, which seems to be full of fear or doubt or difficulties or temptations, attractions, repulsions, these are called technically duality, the pair of opposites, heat and cold, pleasure, pain, faith and doubt and so on, all of these come under a central heading, duality, pairs of opposites. We tend to make things much more complicated. And so we tend to hang on to a historical past. We chew the cud of resentments. We insert doubts and reinsert them and puzzle over them and ask questions about past. And really, we don't stop to consider, even if we identified what the cause was of some difficulty, how will it help you now? A train which is late and you missed is gone. You can't take a fishing line out and catch it and bring it back. It's not going to come back. It's gone. What is gone is gone. A train of time appears to be there. And it travels, it arrives at your immediate present station, and it goes on. And there's no point in being anxious. Where is the next train coming? Will it come? Will it have an accident? Will there be a delay? All these we cannot insert. And if you didn't have any questions, now you'll have some questions, about the future. What if this? What if that? But these are all hypothetical questions. We are sitting here in the ashram. What if a gang of burglars comes and opens the windows and robs the place? Well, what if a gang of police come after them and arrest them? I don't know. Hypothetical question requires hypothetical answer. Is it a useful use of energy to think endlessly on these future problems and give ourselves anxieties? What is the result of it? Both dwelling on the past and the future has its impact on our immediate environment. Our immediate environment is called the body, human body. And every thought gets picked up because thought is superior, more subtle, in other words, and more causal than the physical body. Theoretically, there's no real separation between the two. We have to read Raja Yoga on it to find it out, that mind is subtle matter and matter is gross mind. That's the only difference. You can say that physically or physiologically, the body takes the subtle portion of what we eat and registers it in the neurological network of the brain and produces the mind or reactions or whatever it is. But it's still made from food. It's still physical. There's an argument about brain versus mind. Well, the argument goes away when you consider both are material. So one is subtle and one is gross. That's the only difference. So having impacted the body and having then created a reaction to our stress by taking in, let's say, processed foods in quantities that are bigger than our needs, because it produces something like serotonin or something, some kind of satisfaction chemicals, and makes us feel happy for about 5 minutes, if that. And because it's not making us happy, then maybe we take more in. And then we develop a habit, which is not necessarily useful for the body. And this accumulates in the body. And it accumulates to the extent that it takes advantage of the body's tolerance. Toxic material accumulated in the body that is not dispensed with, as a habit which wild animals don't have. Wild animals don't have irritable bowel syndrome. Wild animals don't have, constipation. Wild animals don't have, heart disease. I've seen some huge elephants in my time. I haven't seen one suffer from blood pressure or heart attack, or diabetes or anything like that. You imagine a giraffe with such a long neck, quite a humorously designed creature. It has to open its legs so wide in order to bring the neck down to drink water. Imagine now, you see, if some dangerous animal comes, like a lion or something, and thinks that looks like a tasty animal. Of course, the lion's point of view is only seeing a small portion, the backside of it, because the front side is immersed in the water. A humorous scene like that. And the giraffe is drinking nicely. But imagine, it should have some kind of heart condition, because the heart is situated just as our heart is situated in the chest, and has to pump the blood way, 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 way up the skyscraper of the neck and arrive at the top of the head. Such a design is there. Yet, I never saw a giraffe who had a heart attack or who had heart problems and difficulties. So how is that? Why is that? There was and I think I may have told you this before, there was a man who conducted some experiments. He got a Nobel Prize for it. Alexis Carrel is his name, or was his name. And anyway, he wanted to experiment. If I take organic cells, let's say from a chicken's heart or something like that, and keep them alive in a laboratory situation. And the way I'll keep them alive is I'll keep them in something like an enclosed laboratory environment where I monitor very carefully all the necessary calculated nutrients that should go in to keep their cells alive, and all the waste products that should come out, and make sure there's a good balance. Only the best nutrients going in, and then monitor their use, and then monitor that exactly the same, the waste products will come out. Make a mass balance like that. He kept these cells going for something like 10 years, way, way beyond a chicken's lifespan. He theorized, actually, if it can happen there, it should surely happen with humans. We can surely keep the body going for a long time, longer than the traditional life expectancy, theoretically. Now, I don't know what modern science says today about that, because I think there are some kind of things within the nucleus of the cells which deteriorate over time. And there's a big investigation amongst big major companies about how to make sure that these things don't deteriorate. If I'm not mistaken, I think they call tellurides or something like that. Anyhow, the fact of the matter is that if all the right nutrients are going in and all the right waste products are going out, and in between there is no stress or anxiety, cells don't have it. Organic cells that you put in a laboratory situation never had any stress. We take that out. Then what will happen to the instrument that we call the body? And then what would be the purpose of prolonging its life? Well, the thing that is keeping us going is not a bad investor. And what is that? This question also is being asked. So having asked what is karma, he then says, what is said to be adibhuta, that is, what is said to be the material elements, if you will, the material side of things. What is, in other words, another way of saying, what are the essential components of material existence? And then he's asking, what is adideva? What is the regulating system that keeps that going? And then he's asking, what is, or who and how is that adiyajna? That means that first sacrificial thing. Because knowing that in any system, to get something, something else has to be sacrificed. We can light a candle, let it shine, but it's another way of describing the light is there at the expense of the wax or the expense of the ghee or whatever material you're using. When you light a agarbatti or an incense stick, the smoke is going up. I've never seen the smoke go down, so we know the smoke goes up. We don't know what the variation will be. This is called life. We know some fixed things, and we know there are some variables there. That's called life. But we know that the original stick we put there is not going to stay like that. It's going to be depleted, and the ash is there. And if we measure the quantity, do a mass balance with the ash, with the smoke that went off, if we're able to catch it, then the original mass, nothing has changed. From a material point of view, it's the same thing. From a form point of view, what we call nama-rupa, from the rupa point of view, it's changed. Transformational causation is there. So what is that self-sacrificing thing that keeps things going? That's the next question. And it must be here in the body. And how? How is it? At the time when this body has gone, or near to it, at the time of death, at that moment, how is this, how are you, he says, that is, how is God to be known? And he already knows by the self-control. He already knows self-controlling is required. So how do we exercise self-control is what he's asking. Now the answer comes beautifully. So Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavot Yatmam Uchyate. The Lord said, the imperishable, the supreme is Brahman. So what is that supreme? We're not saying God. We're saying there's a supreme that is both transcendent and immanent, like the sun, with or without the glass. But the sun is perishable. And so that is the difficulty by you saying all these various examples, that there are no perfect examples, because they're exactly that. They're symbols of what we want to try to portray by using a kind of story form, an analogy form of what we want to say. So, imperishable, what does that mean? In contrast to that, every part of the objects, including body and mind, all of that is perishable. And because it has parts, if it didn't have parts, that would be different. But it is an aggregate of parts. And as long as there's an aggregate of parts, it perishes. So therefore, that is why when you buy a car, you're buying a depreciating asset. You won't get wealthy by doing it. You'll get around, no doubt. It's a useful form of transport. You may require it to get wealth. But it's a perishable thing. Don't be surprised if one day it doesn't pass your NCT test. So at some point or other, this body will break down, and we shouldn't accelerate it by wronging living, by treating it carelessly. So it is the only thing we can understand that is imperishable. It doesn't perish. Then it is the supreme. Supreme means whatever idea or ideal of perfection you have, it's above that also. You can't think of anything higher than it. And that is what we call Brahman. Answered. Then, dwelling in each body, that same supreme principle is called the individual soul, what is called Adhyatma. That being that you find in every person, in yourself, that is the same as that Brahman. It's just we change the language, that's all. Just to make a small distinction. Then the sacred offering, which causes the origin and development of all beings, is called action. This is a definition of karma. We can repeat it. The sacred offering, which causes the origin and development of beings, that is the thing that it gets is a kind of a cause of origin, a cause of development, growth. Don't think that you are growing independently. Don't think that you have your own origin. That is called karma. That is the original action that gets perpetuated as a law of sowing and reaping. And so karma, that is useful to us, good action, pure action, action that is loaded with sattva, is responsible for our healthy growth. But wrong thinking, fearful thinking, thinking of our doubtful historical past, for example, all of that, that will also arrange our development in a negative way. Then, adibhutam ksharo bhava purushacha, the devatam, perishable things are called adibhuta. Now, adibhuta, bhuta, elements. And we know that there are basically 5 elements. And if we want to understand this world better, it's good to understand that what we see as the world is a manifestation of these subtle elements. 5 of them are there, identified. But then Krishna says, I alone am the supreme sacrifice. I'm the adhyatma, here in this body. I'm the one that can rescue you by my own sacrifice. And then whoever, at the time of death, gives up the body and departs, we are told by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the great authority on death, dying, bereavement, says that nobody dies without willingly letting go. When you willingly say, that's it, I surrender, then that's when things depart. But even at the time of death, one who gives up the body and departs, remembering me alone, attains my being. There's no doubt about this, he says. He emphasizes there is absolutely no doubt about this. Now, the difficulty for us is how to remember this divine at the time of death, forgetting it in life. Not possible. We have to entrench it in our unconscious mind so that it has a pulling power for us. And the unconscious mind is a suction. It draws things toward us. So if we think of God, it's drawing God toward us. If we think of difficulties at work, it's drawing that toward us. I want to solve all my difficulties. By acknowledging you have difficulties, you're drawing difficulties to you. It's extremely subtle, but it's an absolute law. We are what we think, in a sense, just as we are what we eat, in a sense. So we can refer to Descartes when he says this, Then, so the jiva, the individual soul is, as it were, comprised of all our experiences that are growing, that are outgrowing our ignorance. We can call that jiva. And jiva really is tapping into this highest principle. Sometimes in a dualistic way, for some people in a qualified non-dualistic way, and some by saying, I and the Father are one. 3 approaches being there, but always tapping into the blissful honey of the Supreme. Then, just to make sure everybody understands this, yam yam va pi smaram bhavan jajati anti kalavaram. Whatever a person thinks of at the last moment, when he leaves the body, that alone he attains. Same thing with sleep. The last thought in going to sleep is your first thought on waking. In that same way, your last thought, sustained even at the moment of the death, that you attain afterwards. So whatever a person thinks of at the last moment, that alone he attains, being ever absorbed in the thought thereof. Therefore, and he gives the answer to the question, what if we just suddenly think, doctor says I'm going to die on Tuesday, 6 p.m. So at 2 minutes to 6, I think I'll think of God. No, it doesn't work that way, because at 2 minutes to 6, you won't be thinking of God. Because tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. Therefore, at all times, think of me and continue to live your life. His language is, in the context of Arjuna, fight on. With mind and intellect devoted to me, you will surely come to me. He gives all the answers to all the questions. And with the mind not wandering after anything else, make sure that it is steadfast by what? By the method of constant practice, not occasional practice, constant practice, all the time, no holiday for it. And meditating on the Supreme Resplendent Lord. If you do that, that's what you'll reach. So it's a wonderful thing, and then it goes on to describe how the yogi will relinquish the body and so on. We won't go into that. So there are some questions, significant questions, which all of us basically are asking. And Krishna very kindly is answering them all in brief sentences. Now, of course, we've heard it, but now will we absorb it? And if you have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, you take that 8th chapter and you read and reread and study up to the 8th stanza. And there you'll see the question, which basically is to do with worship of God, 1 to 8. And you'll get your answers. Well, I'm looking at the clock. It's 15 minutes past 11. Are there any more questions? We often forget to be grateful and focus on problem. Oh, yes. Supposing there's somebody who comes to your door with a chocolate cake every day, forget about the health benefits or otherwise. If you like chocolate cake, so be it. Then you ask that person, every day, you're bringing this for me and my family. Why? What's the catch? And the person says, no catch. I just like making chocolate cakes and I enjoy giving it to you. And I enjoy that you're enjoying it. I don't want any reward for it. I don't want any money for it. It's not for any purpose. It's just to please you. It's just as an offering of love. How will we regard this person? Will we not be grateful? And more than that, other feelings will surface. Will there not be a certain love for that person also? Now, the fact of the matter is we are freely supplied with everything. We never had to pay tax for our air. So far, the government hasn't catched on to this, and that's fine, and caught on to this. We have air for free. We have the capacity to take that component of the air, namely oxygen. We have about 20% of it in the air, something like that. We take some nitrogen, we take some carbon. We make use of it. I'm saying we make use of it, but we have no knowledge about doing it. It's simply happening by itself. So we are taking things for granted. And the moment we take things for granted, we forget to be thankful. Gratitude escapes us. The other thing is then, gratitude gets pushed out of the door when we focus on these problems. And the language itself is a kind of misunderstanding, a distortion of the Vedanta approach to what is life. Life is not there as problems like darts or arrows designed to hit you personally. They're not designed like that. Nature is a rough thing, and there are smooth things with it. It's smooth and rough. And without those contrasts, what we call this universe and life and so on doesn't actually work. It's the grease of life that makes things work is called frustration. And that's a fundamental principle of how things work. And if it wasn't for frustration, nothing would work. So we have to take what we call life with all its nature, with natural laws, understand how these laws work. For example, if I want to lower an empty bucket down into a well, it's very easy. I can take advantage of gravity. But when I fill it with water and pull it up, then I have to use something else. And if it's a vast amount of water, such as in a big mine or something, then I have to use a hoist, an electric hoist. In the ancient days, maybe a donkey or something, or a horse. But now I use modern horsepower in a motor, and I haul it up. I can't complain to nature. You made it easier on this occasion. Now you made it more difficult for me, and start complaining. Take up the nature's board of management and say, I have an official complaint, I was too large. Nature did me a favor on the one hand, made it difficult for me on the other hand. No, I understand nature, and we deal with it, and we're equipped to deal with it. Don't complain about it, use the equipment. If there are thorns on the road, put tough shoes on. If there are potholes in the road, take a four-wheel drive. If it rains, put on a raincoat, take an umbrella. So I think there's an Irish saying like that. It is better, what is it saying? Than curse the dark is the end of it. It's better to light a candle than curse the dark. That's the saying, yeah. You sit in the dark and curse, it's dark, it's dark, it's dark. There's a wonderful mantra. It's dark, it's dark. What was your mantra last night? I repeated endlessly, it's dark, it's dark, it's dark. Didn't you put an electric light on? Didn't you light a candle? Didn't you make it light? Oh, okay, yes. So when we fill our whole life with the so-called problems, I call them so-called problems because they're all remedies and solutions to every so-called problem, and we should change our language about it. We should call them adventures in life. We should call them sporting opportunities. Now you may think, but they don't seem to be sporting opportunities. Well, you didn't think of life as a sport or a game. That's the difficulty. So revalue everything. And in revaluing everything, you'll see that it is something presented in order for you to use your ingenuity, your creativity, even your faith to deal with what seems to be the most difficult circumstances. This whole Bhagavad Gita, by the way, is to do with difficult circumstances. Arjuna is faced with the most difficult circumstance of his entire life. And Krishna is saying, you can do it. And what's the basis of you doing it? The internal thing that is imperishable and never changes. When you resort to that, what religion calls God, more and more, and the more you see it in nature as a free gift, manifesting, flowing your way, always, never stopping. Food gets digested without our asking. Heart is getting pumped without our asking. The body is working well mechanically without our asking. Pocket money for free thinking is provided without our asking, even though we spend it in self-sabotaging ways and useless ways, creating problems for ourselves. So you wouldn't complain in a game of Wimbledon tennis that a ball is coming your way. You appeal to the umpire representing the God, arbitrator. You're the judge of the universe. Oh, umpire, I have a complaint. Yes, what is it? This man keeps throwing balls at me. Oh, but you have a racket? Yes, yes. You took tennis lessons? Yes, yes, yes. You have a whole audience before you? Yes, yes, yes. Are they expecting some performance? Yes, 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 yes. Why don't you use your skill? Okay. But the balls are coming. And when they come, please ask for a more difficult shot. And return it with equal skill, please. So when we revalue so-called life in this way, not only does the sense of humor come up as joy, but we also handle in a practical way what is coming toward us, using our God-given skills and talents, you might put it in that way, and see life in a more adventurous, joyful way. Now you may say, that seems difficult because I have a unique set of problems, and everybody claims this unique set of problems, unfortunately. But I can assure you, the whole of humanity has so-called obstacles. These are not problems, by the way. These are obstacles. And our game in life is to remove the obstacles, get around, not remove them. I should be careful, not remove the obstacles, but learn how to get over the obstacles. You see in my introduction to the Enneagram what I'm saying. If we were using life or interpret it as a game of hurdling, jumping over hurdles, and you say, I can do it, but remove the hurdles, please. No, use your skill to overcome them. And this requires faith, of course. And behind that is quite right what you say. Behind that is gratitude when you notice everything being supplied free of charge with no tax involved and no aspect of return. We call this love. Love has no understanding of give love back. There's no fear in it. There's no reward in it. There's no rival in it. This is Swami Vivekananda's oft-repeated definition of love. Triangular thing. So how do we do that? If we feel we don't have it, we pray for it. We ask for it. You give me everything, give me one more thing. What is that? Give me a thirst for you. We were reading a passage yesterday from the Gospel of Ramakrishna, where Ramakrishna is telling the story of the student who wants to know what the primary thing is. When will I know? When this kind of realization, this aha moment will come. Oh, come down to the lake. Okay. Then the teacher plunges the student's head into the water. And the student is struggling with air bubbles coming up, thrashing around. How did you feel? I thought I was going to die. When you feel that kind of desperate yearning for truth or God, then you know it's close. The aha moment is there. So we should pray at least for a yearning heart. We should pray, please increase my desire for you. Typically, in instructing people in meditation, I'll say, you pray for four things: that you retain that your discernment is not lost. You pray for discernment. You pray for detachment. You pray for, above all, a yearning heart, pure love. It's an opening thing. The opposite is a closing thing. Jealousy is a closing thing. Self-doubt is a closing thing. Fear is a closing thing. Unfulfillment is a closing thing. Dissatisfaction is a closing thing. Negativity is a closing thing. But love is an opening thing. Gratitude is an opening thing. Faith is an opening thing. And there's no stress involved in it. It's a foolproof remedy for stress. So make yourself an opening thing, an opening mechanism. Don't have a shop which is always closed. Make sure it's open and available for everybody. You know, in this place we have a number of shutters on windows. Every morning we open the shutters to let the light in, but from the outside, they're open. So to keep the shutters closed is another way of saying for the individual, that is to make yourself closed, ecocentric, insulated, is equivalent to saying, complaining about the darkness. No, light a candle, light a lamp, put on the electrical light. You have the opportunity to do that. So when we get into that problem area and occupied with that, and that saturates the mind, we have to be observant enough to see what is happening to the unconscious mind and make sure that we stop it, even for a time being, not repress it, but allow it to come, but allow it to go, and take the opportunity of the next train coming and get on it. Sometimes you see a train comes and you miss the train. You're standing on the platform, the train is there, and you have opportunity to go on it, but you don't notice the train is there because you are worried that the train left previously, and when will the next one come, and you never notice the one in front of you. So we have a unit, which we can fill with the full glory and optimism and beauty and goodness of the present moment. God is standing there. You have to understand that. That will produce eternal gratitude. You see the formula of Oates: observe, appreciate, and thankfulness. Continuously apply that. Do it in the simple things. The things that we don't normally notice, things we take for granted. The sun rises every morning, we take it for granted. The sun sets every evening, we take it for granted. The air is supplied, we take it for granted. We don't even notice it. The lungs are moving, we take it for granted. The heart is pumping, we take it for granted. The capacity to walk, we take it for granted. The capacity to swing the arms and legs at the same time, we take it for granted. The capacity to walk upright, we take it for granted. The capacity to meditate, we take it for granted. The capacity to do some good for another, we take it for granted. The capacity that we have as a recipient, we take it for granted. So don't take it for granted. Then gratitude automatically replaces it. Well, thanks for the question, because we now occupied the remaining 15 minutes. I hope it was useful. Continuous practice, you see. That's it. Fill the mind continuously with truth and goodness and beauty and love, all the highest values. Never stop it. Never allow any complaining voice to come in to the psyche. Never allow the old things to come in. Of course, if they come in, they're already allowed. But don't allow that to stop the replacement thoughts of truth and beauty and goodness and love and harmony, all those things. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swamiji.